Racist cop kicks black tennis player. Her backup team changes everything. The video begins by setting the scene, providing context about the tennis player who has been making waves in her sport. Despite her rising career, she faces an unexpected and appalling encounter. A routine day turns into a nightmare when a police officer, driven by racial bias, confronts her in an aggressive manner. This encounter escalates drastically, leading to a physical altercation where the officer kicks her, an act that highlights the racial injustices still prevalent in society. If you are enthusiastic about this narrative, please inform us. If you appreciated the video, press 1. If not, select 0. Your feedback genuinely motivates me to collect additional uplifting and significant narratives.
Being a black woman in a predominantly white sport, Brianna had faced scrutiny at every turn, whether it was from the media, her competitors, or even the very institutions that were supposed to support her. Yet, despite everything, she had succeeded. Today, she returned to her hometown not only as a champion, but also as someone who had transcended the sport itself. But coming home wasn't just about basking in the glory of her achievements. For Brianna, it was a way to reconnect with her roots and the people who had supported her long before the world knew her name. Among them was her uncle, Judge David Wilson, a man whose influence on her life had been as profound as any coach or mentor. Judge Wilson was known not only for his unyielding sense of justice, but also for his deep care for his family. After the passing of Brianna's father, Judge Wilson had stepped in. Becoming more than just an uncle, he became a father figure, a pillar of support in her life. This trip home, however, wasn't just another family reunion. Judge Wilson had arranged something special for Brianna, a private tennis match at an exclusive club where only the most elite and influential members of society gathered. The club had a long history of being a haven for the wealthy, the powerful, and the connected. It was also the place where Brianna's father had spent many weekends playing with his brother, Judge Wilson, in their younger years. Now, in memory of her father and in honor of her recent victories, the judge had secured the court for a private match between the two of them. Brianna arrived a day earlier than planned, wanting to surprise her uncle and spend a quiet evening in the city before the big event. She decided to take a walk through the park where she used to train as a teenager. The park was a place that held deep meaning for her. It was where she had first learned to perfect her serve, where her father had encouraged her, and where she had spent countless hours honing the craft that would one day make her a global sensation. As she walked through the familiar paths, the trees casting long shadows under the fading evening sun, Brianna felt a sense of calm. The world outside might be full of pressure and expectations, but here, in the quiet of her hometown, she could just be herself, Brianna, not the superstar tennis player. She wore casual athletic gear, a simple tracksuit, and sneakers, nothing that would immediately call attention to who she was. It was a deliberate choice. She didn't want to attract any unnecessary attention, not today. However, her peace was about to be shattered. Officer Ryan Steele was on patrol in the same park that evening. Steele had been on the force for over a decade, but his career had not gone the way he had hoped. He had started with big dreams, aspirations of making a name for himself, climbing the ranks, and becoming someone people looked up to. But reality had been far less kind. Steele's career had stagnated, largely due to his own actions, poor decisions, disciplinary issues, and a growing sense of bitterness. In the past few years, his frustrations had turned into resentment, particularly toward people he saw as undeserving of their success. It didn't take long for Steele to notice Brianna as she strolled through the park. She was an unusual sight, a black woman, athletic, confident, and clearly out of place in what Steele considered his part of town. His instincts, shaped more by his biases than by any real evidence, kicked in. To Steele, she didn't belong here. He didn't know who she was, he wasn't a tennis fan, and even if he had been, he wouldn't have expected to see someone like Brianna walking around without an entourage, without the trappings of fame. In his mind, she was just another person who didn't fit. Steele's first instinct was to assert his authority, to remind her of where she was. But instead of approaching her with any form of professionalism, he chose a more aggressive path. He pulled his patrol car up onto the curb, stepping out with an air of dominance that had more to do with his need to feel powerful than with any genuine concern for public safety. "Hey," Steele called out, his voice sharp and demanding. Brianna turned, her calm expression shifting to one of slight confusion. She had done nothing wrong, and her instinct was to remain composed. She had dealt with situations like this before, though not as often as people might assume. Being a public figure didn't make her immune to prejudice, but she had learned over the years how to navigate these moments with grace. Still, something about this officer's tone set off warning bells in her mind. "Is there a problem?" Officer Brianna asked, her voice steady and respectful, though she couldn't shake the feeling that this interaction wasn't going to go well. Steele approached her, his posture aggressive, as if ready for a confrontation. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, ignoring her question. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, as if searching for anything that could justify his suspicion. "I'm just walking through the park," Brianna replied, keeping her tone calm. "Is there a reason I shouldn't be?" Steele narrowed his eyes, stepping closer, his hand resting on his belt. "This park is closed," he lied, knowing full well it wasn't. He wanted to push her to see how she would react. Brianna's eyes flickered with disbelief. She knew the park wasn't closed, it was a public space, open until late evening. But she also knew that challenging him directly might escalate the situation unnecessarily. Instead, she decided to diffuse it as best she could. "I didn't see any signs," she said, her voice still calm. "If the park is closed, I'll leave." But Steele wasn't satisfied. Something about her demeanor, her composure, irritated him. He wasn't used to people like her, people who didn't immediately cower or submit to his authority. And the fact that she wasn't apologizing or showing any sign of fear made him angrier. "You think you can just do whatever you want, don't you?" he sneered, stepping even closer, his voice dripping with disdain. "Just because you're who you are." Brianna's heart raced. Now it was clear this wasn't about any park being closed. This was about something else, something far more personal. She had dealt with subtle racism throughout her career, but this was something more direct, more visceral. "I'm not sure what you mean," Brianna replied carefully, trying to keep the situation from spiraling out of control. Steele's face twisted in anger. He wasn't about to let this woman, this stranger, challenge him. "You don't belong here," he growled, the words spilling out before he could even think them through. That was it. The underlying message had finally surfaced, and there was no mistaking it. Brianna felt a rush of anger, but she kept it contained, knowing that losing her composure could only make things worse. "I'm just going for a walk," she said again, her voice firmer this time. "If you'd like, I can leave." But Steele had gone too far to back down now. His pride was on the line, and he wasn't about to let her leave so easily. He took another step forward, his hand now resting dangerously close to his holster. "No," he said coldly. "You're coming with me." Brianna stood still, her muscles tensing as she processed Officer Steele's words. "You're coming with me" echoed in her mind, triggering a cascade of thoughts. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was simply taking a walk through a public park, like any other citizen. Yet here she was being treated like a criminal. Steele's expression had morphed into something darker, something dangerous. This wasn't just an overzealous officer doing his job, this was personal. Steele moved closer, his hand hovering over the holster as if waiting for any excuse to escalate the situation. Brianna's heartbeat quickened, but she remained calm, a survival instinct she had honed through years of navigating spaces where she was often the only black person in the room. Whether it was a board meeting, a sponsor's dinner, or a tennis match on the international stage, she had learned how to keep her composure, how to not give people what they wanted a reaction. "I'm not sure I understand," Brianna said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "What is it exactly that I've done, officer?" Steele's eyes narrowed, and the corner of his mouth twitched as if he were holding back a sneer. He didn't answer her question directly. Instead, he reached out and grabbed her arm, his grip rough and demanding. The suddenness of it took her by surprise. "Hey," she exclaimed, her voice sharper than intended. "Let go of me." Steele didn't release his grip. If anything, his hold tightened, and he began to pull her toward his patrol car. His earlier aggression was escalating into something more physical, something more dangerous. Brianna felt the anger rising within her, but she kept it under control. She knew she had to. There was too much at stake. "This is an unlawful arrest," she said firmly, trying to maintain a calm exterior despite the surge of adrenaline now coursing through her veins. "You have no grounds for this." Steele stopped, yanking her closer so that they were now face to face, his breath hot against her skin. "I don't need to explain myself to you," he spat. "You think you're above the law, don't you? Walking around like you own the place, like rules don't apply to you." Brianna's mind raced. This wasn't about the law, this was about control, about Steele's need to exert power over her. She had dealt with microaggressions her entire life, but this was different. This was overt, hostile, and physically threatening. "Listen, I haven't done anything wrong," she said, trying one last time to reason with him. "You don't need to do this. Let's talk this out." But Steele wasn't interested in talking. He was already too far gone, too caught up in his need to assert dominance over her. In his mind, she represented everything he resented: success, confidence, power. And worse, she was a black woman who dared to challenge his authority. "You don't tell me what to do," Steele growled, pushing her roughly toward the side of his car. The movement was forceful, and Brianna stumbled, nearly falling to the ground. The pain in her arm from his grip was starting to spread, but she didn't let it show. In the back of her mind, Brianna knew she needed help. Her phone was still in her pocket, but she couldn't reach for it now without provoking him further. She glanced around the park, hoping someone might be nearby, someone who could witness what was happening. But the area was deserted, the late afternoon light casting long shadows on the empty paths. "Turn around," Steele barked, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Hands behind your back." Brianna didn't move. She couldn't believe this was happening, not here, not now, and not for simply walking in the park. She had been in situations where she had felt unfairly targeted before, but this was beyond anything she had ever experienced. "I said, turn around," Steele repeated, his voice rising in frustration. His hand moved to his holster, and for a split second, Brianna thought he might draw his weapon. She knew she had to make a decision: comply and de-escalate, or stand her ground and risk an even worse outcome. Brianna closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and slowly turned around. She placed her hands behind her back, feeling the cold metal of the handcuffs clamp around her wrists. Steele pushed her roughly against the side of the car, and Brianna winced as the edge of the door dug into her hip. This wasn't just about arresting her. This was about humiliating her, about making sure she knew her place. And Steele was enjoying every second of it. Just as he was about to finish securing the handcuffs, a voice cut through the air. Officer Steele, it was a sharp, authoritative tone, one that immediately commanded attention. Brianna turned her head as much as she could, straining to see who it was. Walking toward them was a woman in her late 40s, wearing a tennis uniform and carrying a racket bag over her shoulder. Her eyes were fixed on Steele, and her expression was a mix of anger and disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. Steele looked up, startled. He clearly hadn't expected anyone to interrupt, much less someone who seemed to know who he was. "Stay out of this," Ma'am Steele said, his voice tight with annoyance. "This is none of your business." "Oh, it's very much my business," the woman shot back, stepping closer. "You're arresting one of the most famous athletes in the world, for what? Walking in a public park." Brianna felt a surge of relief. Someone had recognized her. But that relief was short-lived as she realized Steele's grip on her hadn't loosened. In fact, he seemed more agitated than ever. "She's breaking the law," Steele muttered, though even he seemed less confident in his statement now. "The only person breaking the law here is you, officer," the woman said, her voice cold. "You've crossed a line." Steele's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, the woman pulled out her phone and snapped a quick picture of Brianna in handcuffs. She didn't need to say anything more. The image spoke for itself. "Do you have any idea who she is?" the woman continued, her voice dripping with incredulity. "You've just assaulted Brianna Wilson, a world-renowned tennis champion, in broad daylight. I'd say your career is officially over." Steele's hand trembled slightly on Brianna's arm. He glanced between her and the woman, realization dawning on him too late. He had made a mistake, a huge one. But his pride, his deep-seated anger, wouldn't allow him to admit it. "This isn't over," Steele muttered under his breath, his face contorting with frustration. But he finally released his grip on Brianna's arm, stepping back just enough to let her stand upright. Brianna's heart was still racing, but she managed to compose herself. She turned slowly to face Steele, her wrists still bound by the handcuffs. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since the encounter began, she saw uncertainty in his gaze. "This could have ended differently," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But you chose this path." Steele said nothing. His hand hovered near his holster again, as if he were still considering his options. But the presence of the woman and the knowledge that he had just assaulted a public figure held him back. As the woman stepped closer to Brianna, Steele's radio crackled to life. It was a call from his superior, asking for his location. He hesitated for a moment before turning and walking back to his car. He didn't even look at Brianna as he got inside and drove away, leaving her standing there, still cuffed, but no longer at his mercy. As Steele drove away, the tension in the air remained thick. Brianna, still standing in the middle of the park with handcuffs biting into her wrists, felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The woman who had intervened was now standing beside her, concern etched across her face. "I'm so sorry about this," the woman said, her voice softer now that Steele was out of earshot. She carefully pulled out a key from her tennis bag and unlocked the cuffs with quick precision. "My name's Claire. I've been a member of this club for years, and I've never seen anything like that." Brianna flexed her wrists as the cuffs fell away, the skin red and raw where Steele's grip had been the tightest. She felt a mix of gratitude and frustration. Claire had stepped in at the right moment, but it didn't erase what had happened. Brianna had been treated like a criminal, no, like something worse than a criminal simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time in the eyes of someone like Steele. "Thank you, Claire," Brianna replied, forcing a small smile. You probably just saved me from something a lot worse. Claire shook her head, clearly still rattled by what she had witnessed. You shouldn't have needed saving. This is unbelievable. Her expression hardened. You know, I'm connected with some of the people in local law enforcement. I'm going to make sure this doesn't get buried. Brianna appreciated the gesture, but deep down she knew that people like Steele were rarely held accountable. She had seen it too many times, even if not directly in her own life. The system wasn't designed to protect people like her. It was designed to protect people like Steele. I don't know if it's worth it, Brianna admitted, her voice quiet. I've been through this kind of thing before. It never really changes anything. Claire gave her a surprised look. But you can't just let him get away with it, Brianna. He assaulted you. Brianna met her gaze, and for the first time, Claire seemed to realize just how deep Brianna's frustration went. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to her, and it likely wouldn't be the last. The difference was that this time, it wasn't some random encounter on the street or a subtle dig at her in the press. This time, it was overt. It was violence, plain and simple. I know, Brianna said, the steel returning to her voice. But I've learned one thing over the years. If you want real change, you have to play a different game. Going after him directly might give me some short-term satisfaction, but it won't stop people like him from doing this again and again. Claire frowned. So what do you suggest? I'm going to need to make some calls, Brianna said, rubbing her wrists again. I have connections too. It's not just about Steele, it's about everyone like him, and I have a feeling this goes deeper than just one bad cop having a bad day. Claire nodded, understanding dawning on her. Brianna wasn't interested in just winning a small battle. She was thinking about the bigger picture, about changing the system itself. And that required a different kind of fight. Let's get out of here, Claire suggested. I'll give you a ride back to the club. You shouldn't be walking alone after that. Brianna hesitated for a moment, but then agreed. The adrenaline from the encounter was beginning to wear off, and she realized that her leg was throbbing where Steele had kicked her earlier. She hadn't noticed it at the time, but now it was becoming harder to ignore. They walked together toward the nearby parking lot, where Claire's car was parked. As they drove back to the club, Brianna's mind raced with everything that had just happened. Her leg pulsed with pain, and her wrists were still sore, but she was more concerned with what came next. She knew Steele wasn't finished with her, not by a long shot. Men like him never were, and she wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily either. When they arrived at the club, Claire escorted Brianna inside, offering to get her some ice for her leg. The club was quiet, with only a few members milling about, and Brianna appreciated the calm after the chaos of the park. But it wasn't long before her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw that it was a message from her uncle, Judge David Wilson. Are you okay? I heard something happened. Call me when you're safe. Brianna's heart sank. Of course, her uncle had already heard about the incident. It was only a matter of time before the news reached him. She knew that he would want to get involved, to protect her, but she also knew that this was something she needed to handle on her own, at least for now. Her uncle had powerful connections, but that power came with a price. Involving him too soon might escalate things in a way that would make it harder for her to control the narrative. She quickly typed back a response, I'm fine. I'll explain everything soon. Don't worry. Just as she hit send, Claire returned with an ice pack and a concerned look. I texted a few friends. One of them knows the police chief personally. They'll hear about this by morning. Brianna took the ice pack and placed it on her leg, wincing slightly as the cold hit the bruised area. Thanks, Claire. I appreciate it. Claire sat down across from her, clearly still rattled. I just don't get it. You've done so much for this town. You're a hero here. How could someone treat you like that? Brianna sighed. Because to him, I'm not a hero. To him, I'm just another black woman who doesn't belong in his world. Claire looked at her, sadness and anger mixing in her expression. That's horrible. It is, Brianna agreed. But it's also reality. I've dealt with people like Steele my whole life. The only difference now is that I have the resources to fight back, and I'm going to. The two women sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Brianna had always known that being successful wouldn't shield her from the prejudice and systemic injustice that permeated society. But today had been a reminder that no matter how high she climbed, she would always be seen as an outsider in certain places. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Brianna glanced at the screen and saw her uncle's name flashing across it. She hesitated for a moment, then answered. Uncle David, she said, trying to sound calm, though she knew he could probably hear the tension in her voice. Brianna, his deep voice came through the phone, full of concern. What the hell happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, she assured him. Just a little shaken up. Some overzealous cop thought it would be fun to rough me up for no reason. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Brianna could almost hear her uncle's fury building. Who was it, he asked, his voice low and dangerous. His name is Officer Steele, Brianna replied. He's got a chip on his shoulder the size of the Grand Canyon. But I'm handling it, Uncle David. You don't need to worry. Don't need to worry, her uncle repeated, his tone incredulous. Brianna, you were assaulted by a police officer. That's not something you just handle on your own. I'm getting involved. Brianna closed her eyes, knowing that this was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. Her uncle was a powerful man, and when he decided to get involved in something, things tended to escalate quickly. Uncle David, please, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I know you want to help, but I need to do this my way. If you come in guns blazing, it's only going to make things worse. I have a plan. There was another pause on the other end of the line. She could tell that her uncle was struggling with the idea of letting her handle this on her own. He had always been protective of her, especially since her father's death. But Brianna was no longer the little girl he had watched grow up. She was a grown woman now, capable of fighting her own battles. All right, he said finally, though his reluctance was clear. But if you need me, you call. And I mean that. Brianna, don't try to take this all on by yourself. I won't, she promised, though she knew she was going to do exactly that. After they hung up, Brianna let out a long breath. Her legs still throbbed, and the weight of what had happened was starting to sink in. But she wasn't going to let Steele win. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about something much bigger. She had always believed in fighting for justice, both on and off the court. And now she was going to have to put that belief into action in a way she hadn't anticipated. But she was ready. Brianna barely slept that night. Her mind replayed the events in the park over and over, each time revealing new layers of frustration and anger. No matter how many times she tried to push it away, the image of Officer Steele's face contorted with hatred, his grip tight on her arm, haunted her. It wasn't just the physical pain that bothered her, it was the humiliation, the feeling of powerlessness in that moment. She had spent her entire career working harder than anyone else, proving herself on and off the court, and still, it wasn't enough. In the eyes of people like Steele, she was just another black woman who didn't belong. The realization of how deeply ingrained that kind of thinking was in the system weighed on her like a heavy stone. But Brianna wasn't the type to wallow in self-pity. She had built her entire life around overcoming challenges, and this was just another obstacle to push through. She knew what needed to be done, but it had to be done carefully. If she acted rashly, the entire situation could spiral out of control. The next morning, after a brief and restless sleep, Brianna sat down with a cup of coffee and stared at her phone. She had made a promise to herself that she wouldn't involve her uncle, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was going to need more help than she had originally anticipated. As much as she wanted to handle this on her own, she knew the limits of her own influence. She wasn't just fighting Steele. She was fighting a system that had allowed people like him to thrive. And systems like that didn't change overnight, nor did they fall because of one person's efforts. She needed allies, people who understood the magnitude of what she was up against. After a few minutes of hesitation, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. There were several people she could call, but one name stood out: Olivia Shaw. Olivia was a civil rights attorney who had built her career on taking down corrupt systems of power. She had represented athletes, activists, and ordinary citizens who had been wronged by the very institutions meant to protect them. Brianna hesitated only for a moment longer before pressing the call button. The phone rang twice before Olivia picked up. "Brianna," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "I've been hearing a lot about your latest victory. How's the golden girl of tennis?" "Not so golden today," Brianna replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm actually calling because I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Brianna could almost hear the shift in Olivia's tone as she processed the seriousness of the situation. What happened? Brianna took a deep breath and recounted the events in the park. She told Olivia everything: Steele's aggression, the humiliation, the handcuffs, and the threat that still lingered even after Steele had driven away. By the time she finished, Olivia was silent for a long moment. "This is bad," Olivia finally said, her voice grim. "But it's also not surprising. The system is set up to protect people like Steele, and unless we play our cards right, he'll walk away without facing any real consequences." "I know," Brianna said. "That's why I'm calling you. I need to make sure that doesn't happen. This isn't just about me, it's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Olivia sighed softly. "You're right. But we have to be smart about this. If we go after him directly, we'll be facing an entire police department that's likely going to close ranks to protect one of their own. We need more than just public outrage, we need leverage." "Leverage?" Brianna asked. Her interest piqued. "Leverage," Olivia confirmed. "There's always more going on behind the scenes than what we see. People like Steele don't act the way they do in a vacuum. He's part of a system that's been allowed to fester for years, and if we can expose the rot beneath the surface, we can make real change. But that means we need to dig deeper." Brianna nodded, even though Olivia couldn't see her. "So, what do we do?" Olivia's voice sharpened with determination. "First, we gather evidence. We need to build a case, not just against Steele, but against the entire system that enables him. That means we'll need records, witness statements, anything that proves a pattern of behavior. Once we have that, we'll bring it to the media and put pressure on the police department. But we don't stop there. We'll need to file a civil suit and hit them where it hurts their wallets." Brianna felt a surge of hope. "I'm in." "I thought you would be," Olivia said, a smile evident in her voice. I'll start pulling together a team, and we'll strategize from there. But Brianna, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. They're going to come after you, and they're going to come after you hard." "I can handle it," Brianna replied, her voice firm. "I've dealt with worse." "I don't doubt it," Olivia said. "But just be careful. They'll use every trick in the book to discredit you, especially once they realize who they're up against. And it won't just be Steele. The department's higher-ups are going to protect their own, and if they feel threatened, they'll fight back." "I'm ready," Brianna said, more for herself than for Olivia. "I've been ready for this fight my whole life." After they hung up, Brianna felt a renewed sense of purpose. Olivia was right, this was bigger than just Steele. If they were going to make real change, they needed to expose the entire system, and Brianna was more than willing to take on that challenge. But first, she needed to talk to her uncle. Judge David Wilson was not an easy man to convince, and Brianna knew this better than anyone. He had always been fiercely protective of her, and ever since her father's death, he had taken on the role of both mentor and guardian in her life. She loved him for it. But it also meant that he was often overbearing, especially when it came to matters of safety. Brianna arrived at her uncle's house later that afternoon, her mind still racing with the conversation she'd had with Olivia. She wasn't entirely sure how to approach the subject with her uncle, but she knew she had to be honest with him. If she tried to handle this without his knowledge, it would only make things worse in the long run. Judge Wilson greeted her at the door, his face lined with concern. "Brianna," he said, pulling her into a hug, "I've been worried sick. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Uncle David, Brianna said, pulling away and giving him a small smile. "I promise." He led her into the living room, where they sat down on the leather couch that Brianna had spent many afternoons lounging on as a child. The room hadn't changed much over the years. Heavy bookshelves lined the walls, filled with law books and framed photos of family moments. Her uncle had always been a man of order and tradition, and his home reflected that. So Judge Wilson said, leaning back in his seat, "Tell me what happened." Brianna recounted the events of the previous day, just as she had with Olivia. Her uncle listened intently, his expression growing darker with every word she spoke. By the time she finished, his jaw was clenched so tightly that Brianna could almost hear his teeth grinding. "That bastard," he muttered under his breath. "I'll have his badge for this." "Uncle David," Brianna said gently, reaching out to touch his arm. "I know you want to help, but we need to be smart about this." Her uncle raised an eyebrow. "Smart? Brianna, this man assaulted you. There's nothing smart about letting him get away with it." "I'm not letting him get away with it," she assured him. "But this isn't just about Steele. This is about the entire system that allows people like him to act with impunity. If we go after him directly, we'll be playing into their hands. They'll frame it as one bad apple, and nothing will change." Judge Wilson narrowed his eyes. "So what's your plan, then?" Brianna took a deep breath. "I've already spoken to Olivia Shaw. We're going to build a case, not just against Steele, but against the whole department. We need to expose the corruption at every level, from the top down. That's the only way we're going to make real change." Her uncle was silent for a moment, his eyes studying her carefully. "And you're sure this is the right move? You know they'll come after you once you start digging. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your career." "I know," Brianna said, "but I can handle it. I've fought through worse." Judge Wilson sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "You've always been strong, Brianna, but this is different. This is dangerous." "I know," she said again, "but it's the only way." For a long moment, Her uncle said nothing. Then, finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "If this is what you want to do, I'll support you. But I'm going to be involved, whether you like it or not." Brianna smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They spent the next hour discussing strategy. Her uncle agreed to reach out to some of his contacts within the legal community to gather additional information on Steele and his history within the department. He also promised to keep things quiet for now, letting Brianna and Olivia lead the charge while he worked behind the scenes. As Brianna left her uncle's house later that evening, she felt more determined than ever. The fight ahead of her was going to be long and grueling, but she wasn't afraid. She had the right people by her side, and she had a plan. And she was ready to bring it to life. The days that followed moved in a blur for Brianna. Every step forward in her fight seemed to be met with new obstacles. Olivia Shaw had mobilized her team of legal experts, investigators, and activists to dig into Officer Steele's past and expose the systemic rot within the police department. But as they began to uncover the extent of the corruption, it became clear that they were facing something much bigger than just one rogue officer. It started with the phone calls. Brianna had always been used to the press calling her for interviews, sponsors reaching out to discuss new deals, and fans flooding her social media with support. But these calls were different. They were vague, menacing, and always came from unlisted numbers. One night, as she sat at her kitchen table, sifting through the reports Olivia had sent her, her phone buzzed again. The number flashed as unknown, but she already knew what to expect. "Brianna Wilson," she answered, her voice steady. For a few seconds there was only silence. Then, a man's voice, low and full of disdain, came through the line. "You think you can take us down, don't you?" Brianna's grip tightened on her phone. She remained silent, unwilling to give whoever was on the other end the satisfaction of a response. The voice continued. "You have no idea what you're up against. You should walk away now before it gets too late. Before you lose everything." The call disconnected abruptly, leaving Brianna staring at her phone, her heart pounding. She had anticipated pushback, even threats, but the reality of it was more unnerving than she had expected. This wasn't just about Steele anymore. Someone higher up had taken notice of her actions, and they weren't going to let her challenge their power without a fight. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. There was no turning back now. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about Officer Steele's racism and violence. There was an entire network of corruption running through the department, and perhaps even beyond that. Brianna had always known this would get ugly, but now the stakes were higher than ever. The next morning, she met with Olivia and her team at the attorney's office. The room was filled with the quiet hum of activity people typing away at laptops, files spread across the table, and the low murmur of discussions happening in the corners. Olivia motioned for Brianna to join her at a side table where a series of documents were laid out. "Things are escalating faster than we anticipated," Olivia said, her expression serious. "We've uncovered some troubling information." Brianna sat down, her stomach churning with anticipation. "What kind of information?" Olivia handed her a file. "It turns out that Steele isn't just some bad cop acting on his own. He's part of a group within the department known as the Brotherhood. They're a tight-knit group of officers who protect each other, no matter what. They've been involved in everything from covering up excessive use of force to planting evidence on suspects. And it goes deep." Brianna flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the reports. Names, dates, incidents, all of it laid out in black and white. The Brotherhood had been operating with impunity for years, shielded by higher-ups who were either complicit or too afraid to act against them. This isn't just about Steele anymore, Olivia continued. If we go after him, we're going to be going after all of them. And they know it. Brianna's mind raced. The phone calls, the veiled threats, it all made sense now. They weren't just trying to intimidate her into silence. They were protecting something much bigger, something that had been festering for years. They're scared, Brianna said softly, more to herself than to Olivia. They wouldn't be trying to threaten me if they didn't think we were getting close. Olivia nodded. Exactly. But that also means they're going to get more desperate. We need to be prepared for whatever comes next. Brianna sat back in her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival for her, for Olivia, and for anyone else who dared to stand up to the Brotherhood. What do we do now? Brianna asked, her voice steady but laced with determination. Olivia's eyes hardened. We keep going. We don't back down. But we need more than just a few reports and witness statements. We need hard evidence, something that can't be dismissed as hearsay or circumstantial. Brianna nodded, already thinking ahead. What about Steele? He's at the center of this. If we can get him to turn on the others. Olivia raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous game, Brianna. Men like Steele don't turn easily. He's deeply entrenched in this, and he knows that if he flips, he'll be a marked man. But it's worth a shot, Brianna insisted. If we can isolate him, make him believe that his brothers won't protect him when things get tough, we might be able to get him to talk. Olivia leaned back, considering the idea. It's risky, but you're right. If we can crack Steele, we can crack the entire operation. They spent the rest of the day working through the details of their plan. Olivia's team would continue gathering evidence, focusing on finding anything that could be used to leverage Steele into cooperating. Meanwhile, Brianna would use her connections to keep the pressure on the department, ensuring that the media attention stayed focused on the corruption within the force. But as the day wore on, Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The threats were becoming more frequent, more direct, and she knew it was only a matter of time before things escalated further. That night, Brianna returned to her apartment, feeling the weight of the day's revelations pressing down on her. As she sat down on the couch, her phone buzzed again. She hesitated, wondering if it was another threatening call. But when she glanced at the screen, it was a message from her uncle. We need to talk. Urgent. Brianna frowned. She hadn't spoken to her uncle much since their last conversation, when she had told him about her plan with Olivia. She had assumed he was giving her the space she needed to handle things on her own, but the urgency of his message made her uneasy. She quickly dialed his number, and he picked up on the second ring. Brianna, his voice was tense, more tense than she had ever heard him. You need to be careful. Things are worse than I thought. What's going on? Brianna asked, her heart beginning to race. I've been digging into Steele's background, trying to figure out who his connections are in the department. But it goes beyond just the local police. There are political figures involved, people with a lot of power, and they're not going to let this slide. Brianna felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Who's involved? I can't say much over the phone, her uncle replied, his voice low. But you need to know that this isn't just about Steele or the Brotherhood. There are people in the government, people with influence who have a vested interest in keeping this quiet. If we push too hard, they're going to push back. Brianna's mind raced. She had expected resistance from the police department, maybe even from the mayor's office, but this? If what her uncle was saying was true, they were up against something much bigger than they had anticipated. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We tread carefully, her uncle said. Keep gathering evidence, but don't make any public moves until we're absolutely sure we have enough to take them down. If we go too early, they'll bury us. Brianna closed her eyes, feeling the enormity of the situation closing in around her. She had always known this was going to be a fight, but now it felt like a war where the other side had more resources, more power, and more influence than she had ever imagined. Okay, she said finally. I'll be careful. Good, her uncle said, his tone softening slightly. And Brianna, if things get too dangerous, you need to walk away. I know you want justice, but this isn't just about you anymore. You have to think about your safety. Brianna swallowed hard. I know, but I'm not walking away. Her uncle sighed. I figured you'd say that. Just promise me you'll be smart about this. I will, Brianna promised, though she knew the risks were growing by the day. After they hung up, Brianna sat in the darkened room, her thoughts spinning. She had always known that the fight for justice was a dangerous one, but now she was beginning to understand just how high the stakes really were. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. Olivia's team had uncovered more evidence linking Steele and the Brotherhood to a series of incidents over the year's: unlawful arrests, cover-ups of excessive force, and suspiciously missing evidence in several key cases. But it still wasn't enough to make a public move. They needed more. Then, one night, Brianna got another call, this time from Olivia herself. We've got something, Olivia said, her voice breathless with excitement. One of Steele's former colleagues reached out to us. He's willing to talk, but there's a catch. Brianna's heart skipped a beat. What kind of catch? He wants immunity, Olivia explained. He's willing to give us everything: names, dates, evidence, but only if we can guarantee that he won't be prosecuted. Brianna considered this for a moment. Immunity was a big ask, especially for someone who had been complicit in the very system they were trying to take down. But if he had the information they needed, it might be worth it. Can we get him immunity? Brianna asked. Olivia sighed. It's tricky. We'd have to go through the DA's office, and that's going to raise some red flags. Once they know we're working with someone on the inside, it could blow everything open before we're ready. So what do we do? We meet with him, Olivia said. See what he has to offer. If it's enough to take down the whole operation, we'll figure out the rest later. Brianna nodded, though Olivia couldn't see her. Okay, let's do it. The meeting was set for the following night, in a quiet, out-of-the-way bar on the edge of town. Brianna arrived early, her nerves on edge. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew this could be the break they had been waiting for. Olivia arrived a few minutes later, her expression tense. He should be here any minute. They sat in silence, waiting. Brianna's mind raced with possibilities. What if this was it? What if this was the piece of the puzzle that finally brought the whole corrupt system crashing down? Then, the door to the bar opened, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a nervous energy about him. He scanned the room before spotting Brianna and Olivia and made his way over. You must be the ones I talked to, he said, his voice low and cautious. Olivia nodded. You have information for us. The man glanced around nervously before sitting down. Yeah, he said, leaning in close. I've got everything you need, but you've got to promise me one thing: I walk away clean, or this doesn't happen. Olivia exchanged a look with Brianna before turning back to the man. We'll do what we can, she said, but we need to know what you've got. The man hesitated for a moment before pulling out a small flash drive and sliding it across the table. This is everything: files, emails, recordings. It's all there. But you didn't get it from me. Brianna stared at the drive, her heart pounding. This was it. This was what they needed. Olivia reached for the drive, but just as her fingers touched it, the man suddenly stiffened. His eyes widened in panic, and before either Brianna or Olivia could react, he shot to his feet, knocking the table over in the process. What the Brianna started, but the man was already out the door, running as if his life depended on it. Olivia grabbed the drive and shoved it into her bag. "We need to go," she said urgently, pulling Brianna to her feet. "Now." They hurried out of the bar, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Whatever had just spooked their contact, it wasn't good. And it meant that they were running out of time. As they made their way to Olivia's car, Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate even further. The corruption they were fighting was deeper and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And they had just lit the match. The moment Brianna and Olivia left the bar, a cold realization settled over them. Their situation had just taken a dangerous turn. Whoever had spooked their contact was still out there, and they had no idea who was watching or waiting. As they hurried toward Olivia's car, Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little too far. Every distant sound felt amplified in the quiet night. "Get in," Olivia urged, her voice tight with urgency. Brianna slid into the passenger seat, and within seconds they were speeding away from the bar, the tension in the car so thick it was suffocating. Olivia's knuckles were white as she gripped the steering wheel, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. "Do you think he's okay?" Brianna asked, her mind still on their contact. She hadn't even caught his name. 1 second he was handing them the flash drive that could bring down Steele and his entire network, and the next, he was running for his life. "I don't know," Olivia admitted, "but whatever scared him, we need to take seriously. We're getting too close, and they know it." Brianna didn't need convincing. The way their contact had bolted out of the bar, the panic in his eyes, it was clear they weren't dealing with just Steele anymore. They were up against something much bigger and much more dangerous. Olivia's car weaved through the quiet streets, and eventually the looming city skyline gave way to the quieter, residential streets where Brianna lived. The silence between them was filled with unspoken worry. As they pulled up to Brianna's apartment building, Olivia turned off the engine and let out a long, shaky breath. "We need to look at what's on this drive," Olivia said, her voice low. "Whatever's on here is what scared him enough to run. That means it's our best shot at taking down Steele and the Brotherhood." Brianna nodded, though the knot in her stomach tightened. "I know, but we need to be careful. If whoever's out there knows we have this, they won't stop until they get it back." Olivia reached into her bag and pulled out the small flash drive, holding it up to the dim streetlight. "This could be everything we need, Brianna. The key to all of it." "But it could also make us targets," Brianna said quietly, voicing the thought that had been sitting in the back of her mind since they had left the bar. Olivia sighed. "We're already targets. The question now is, what are we going to do about it?" Brianna looked at Olivia, then at the flash drive. This was the moment where they had to decide, would they play it safe, or would they press forward, knowing full well that the next step could put their lives in danger. "Let's do it," Brianna said, her voice firm. "We've come too far to stop now." Olivia nodded, her determination mirroring Brianna's. "Let's go inside. We'll look at the files in private." They moved quickly, not wanting to linger outside any longer than necessary. Inside Brianna's apartment, the tension didn't lift. Olivia pulled out her laptop and inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered as the files loaded, and for a moment, Brianna felt her heart in her throat. What would they find? Evidence. A trap. As the files came up, Olivia clicked through them carefully. There were emails, audio recordings, and spreadsheets, an overwhelming amount of data that painted a picture of corruption so deep it made Brianna's stomach turn. It wasn't just Steele. The Brotherhood had ties to city officials, judges, and even local business leaders. They had been covering for each other for years, hiding evidence, manipulating cases, and ensuring that anyone who got too close to the truth was either silenced or discredited. But then they found something even more damning. One of the audio files was a recording of a conversation between Steele and another officer, a man Brianna didn't recognize. The conversation started out as banter, but soon it took a darker turn. Steele was bragging about how he had set up a black community leader, planting drugs in his car during a routine traffic stop. The recording captured Steele laughing, saying, "It's easy when they expect it. They always think we're coming after them anyway." Brianna's blood ran cold as she listened. This was the proof they needed: direct evidence of Steele's crimes. But it also revealed the mindset of the Brotherhood, a twisted sense of power and entitlement that had allowed them to operate unchecked for so long. Olivia paused the recording and looked at Brianna. "This is it. This is what we need." Brianna nodded, her mind racing. "We need to get this out. We need to make this public." But before they could move, Brianna's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, her heart sinking as she saw the number unknown. She hesitated, then answered. Brianna Wilson, the voice on the other end, said, low and menacing, "You've gone too far this time." Brianna's heart pounded in her chest. "Who is this?" "Doesn't matter," the voice replied. "What matters is that you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. We know what you have, and we're coming for it. You can walk away right now, and we'll let you live. Or you can keep going, and you'll end up like your friend." Brianna's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Your contact," the voice said. "The one you met tonight. He didn't make it very far." The call disconnected, leaving Brianna staring at her phone in shock. She turned to Olivia, her hand trembling. "They killed him." Olivia's eyes widened. "What?" Brianna repeated the words, her voice shaking. "Our contact. He's dead. They know about the flash drive, and they're coming for us." For a moment, Olivia was silent, processing the weight of what Brianna had just said. Then she stood up, her expression hardening. "We need to go. Now." Brianna grabbed her bag, her mind still spinning as they hurried out of the apartment. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore, it was a fight for survival. As they made their way to Olivia's car, Brianna glanced around, half expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. But the streets were quiet, too quiet. Once they were on the road, Olivia spoke again, her voice low. "We need to get this drive somewhere safe. If we can get it to the media, they won't be able to stop us." But Brianna shook her head. "It's too dangerous. If they know we have it, they'll come after anyone we give it to. We can't risk dragging more people into this." "Then what do we do?" Olivia asked, her frustration evident. "We can't just sit on this." Brianna's mind raced, her thoughts coming together in a blur. Then, suddenly, it hit her. "My uncle." "What about him?" Olivia asked. He has connections, Brianna explained. He knows people who can protect us, who can make sure this drive gets where it needs to go without putting us in more danger. Olivia nodded, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. All right, let's go to him. The rest of the drive was a blur of tension and adrenaline. When they finally pulled up in front of Judge Wilson's house, Brianna felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her uncle was the one person she trusted completely, and she knew he would know what to do. They rushed to the door, and within moments, Judge Wilson opened it, his expression filled with concern. Brianna, what's going on? We need your help, Brianna said, her voice breathless. We have evidence on Steele, on the Brotherhood, but they're coming for us. They already killed our contact. Her uncle's face darkened as he listened. Come inside, he said, stepping aside to let them in. We'll figure this out. As they entered the house, Brianna felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. They had the evidence they needed. They had the connections to make it public. And despite the danger they were in, she knew they had come too far to stop now. This was it, the moment they had been working toward. They were on the verge of exposing Steele, the Brotherhood, and the entire corrupt system that had allowed them to thrive for so long. But they also knew that the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous their enemies would become. And there was no turning back now. Judge David Wilson ushered Brianna and Olivia into his study, closing the heavy wooden door behind them. The room was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Brianna placed the flash drive on her uncle's desk, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of their narrow escape. Her uncle sat down, his eyes fixed on the small device that now held the key to unraveling everything. Tell me exactly what's on this, Judge Wilson said, his voice calm but commanding. Olivia took a deep breath and began explaining, detailing the corruption they had uncovered, the incriminating evidence against Officer Steele and the Brotherhood, and how the network of corruption extended far beyond just the police department. She told him about the recordings, the emails, and the documents that laid bare the extent of the rot within the system. Finally, she told him about their contact, the man who had given them the drive, and the threat they had received after his death. Judge Wilson leaned back in his chair, his face grim. This is worse than I imagined, he said quietly. If this gets out, it won't just bring down Steele. It'll expose half the city's leadership. Exactly, Brianna said, her voice firm. That's why we need to act now. We can't sit on this. They'll come after us, and if we wait too long, they'll bury it all. Her uncle nodded slowly, but there was a deep worry etched into his face. You're right, but we need to be smart about this. If we go public without a plan, they'll use every trick in the book to discredit you. They'll twist the narrative and make you look like the villain. And believe me, they're very good at that. Brianna felt a chill run down her spine. She had expected resistance, but hearing it from her uncle made it feel even more real. She wasn't just taking on a corrupt cop or a crooked department, she was taking on a powerful machine designed to protect itself at all costs. So, what do we do? Olivia asked, her voice steady but laced with urgency. Judge Wilson stood up and paced the room, deep in thought. After a few moments, he turned back to them. We need to control the release. If we give this to the media, they'll sensationalize it, and that will give Steele and his people time to cover their tracks. We need to go higher federal level. We need to bypass the local authorities entirely and take this straight to the Justice Department. Brianna's eyes widened. The Justice Department. Do you have that kind of reach? Her uncle gave her a wry smile. I may have a few friends in high places. He paused, then added, but this is going to be dangerous. Once we go federal, we'll have protection, but it'll also paint a target on our backs. They'll know we're coming for them, and they'll do everything they can to stop us before we get there. Brianna exchanged a look with Olivia, the weight of her uncle's words sinking in. They were already in deep, and the danger was real. But this was their only shot. They had come too far to turn back now. "Let's do it," Brianna said, her voice steady. "We need to finish this." Judge Wilson nodded. "I'll make the calls. In the meantime, you two need to lay low. Stay off the grid as much as possible. Don't use your phones or any traceable devices. I'll arrange for safe transport to DC, and we'll get this to the right people." Brianna felt a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in days, they had a plan. It wasn't going to be easy, and the risks were higher than ever, but they had a path forward. The next few days passed in a blur of secrecy and tension. Brianna and Olivia stayed hidden, moving between safe locations arranged by Judge Wilson. They used burner phones to communicate, always wary of being tracked. Meanwhile, Judge Wilson worked behind the scenes, leveraging his connections to arrange a meeting with officials in the Justice Department. Finally, the day came. Brianna, Olivia, and Judge Wilson boarded a private plane bound for Washington, D.C., the flash drive securely hidden among Judge Wilson's legal documents. The flight was tense, each of them aware of the weight of what they were about to do. But there was also a sense of quiet determination. This was it, the moment they had fought for. When they landed, a black SUV was waiting for them on the tarmac. Inside were two federal agents, both with stern expressions and an air of authority. They greeted Judge Wilson with nods of respect, then motioned for Brianna and Olivia to get in the vehicle. No words were exchanged, but the seriousness of the situation was palpable. The drive through Washington was brief, and before long they arrived at a secure government building. They were escorted inside, past layers of security, and into a meeting room where a senior official from the Justice Department was waiting. He was a tall man, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Judge Wilson handed over the flash drive. "This contains evidence of widespread corruption within the police department of our city, including links to political figures and local business leaders. It's all their emails, recordings, documents." The official took the drive, his expression unreadable. "We'll review this carefully," he said, his tone measured. "If what you say is true, this will go straight to the top." Brianna watched as the official placed the drive into a secure case, sealing it shut. The gravity of the moment hit her all at once. They had done it. They had delivered the evidence that would finally bring down Steele and the Brotherhood. But the reality of what came next was still uncertain. "Thank you for bringing this to us," the official said, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "We'll be in touch soon." With that, they were escorted out of the building. As they walked back to the SUV, Brianna felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. The ball was now in the government's court, but until the investigation was made public, there was still a danger looming over them. In the days that followed, Brianna and Olivia stayed under the radar, waiting for word from the Justice Department. The threats had stopped, and the menacing phone calls had ceased, but the tension remained. It was like the calm before the storm. Finally, the news broke. The Justice Department had launched a formal investigation into Steele and the Brotherhood, and several high-ranking officials within the city's government were implicated. The evidence from the flash drive was undeniable, and within days arrests were made. Steele was among the first to be taken into custody, his face